It's 1603. The Elizabethan age gives way to an era of unrest and revolution.
Radical change is the most extraordinary cracking open of politics to let all of these voices out.
First and foremost, it's about freedom of thought.
A political and religious splintering under the Stuart kings. As culture war becomes real war, the king's cavaliers versus parliamentary roundheads.
Radical Protestants hate the visual image.
They fight it out quite literally to the death.
Once you behead the king, everything changes.
From the ashes of war comes a creative flourishing and the rise of a more questioning culture.
Everything's been changed by telescopes and microscopes.
Art becomes about changing the world.
People are questioning what is real and what isn't.
This is a story of civil war and its aftermath, told through the febrile and fertile creativity that surrounds it.
Better to reign in hell and serve in heaven.
This is just one chapter in an epic journey across 1,500 years, through 8 dramatic turning points of history, as contemporary artists and thinkers encounter artworks that defined their age.
It's about this.
Exploring extraordinary creations from around the UK.
You know, you'd think that was God.
The work of past visionaries, mavericks, and rule breakers who responded to their times and shaped the future.
Yeah, got it. This is it.
Oh, look at that. I want to cry.
Tracing a story of creativity, revealing an alternative history of these islands, told through art. In 1603, a new and very different royal dynasty comes to power.
James of the House of Stuart is King of England, King of Scotland, and King of Ireland. He had huge visions for the future of the islands.
He says, we now need a new political model, which is Great Britain.
And the Stuarts are inspired by the opulent royal courts of Europe.
Stuarts are really committed to beautiful things and integrated artworks and design, very close relations with continental Europe.
It is James's son, Charles I, who oversees the completion of the Queen's house in honor of his French wife. It's a statement piece, shot through with the religious and aesthetic tensions of the age, and at its center, a marvel of design.
A revelation of purity and harmony.
The design is completely innovative for England. I think you could call it revolutionary.
It's on the very verge of what can exist technologically.
The Queen's house must have seemed like an alien building landing in London. Nobody's seen anything like this before.
Inigo Jones, first great British architect, he's influenced by Palladio. Palladian architecture is mathematically precise.
If you contrast it with the Tudor tradition, red brick, quite dark, this is beautiful, white, symmetrical, classically proportioned building.
This is architecture at ease with itself. When you get a groundbreaking building like this, that was so different from what went before, it becomes absorbed into the kind of collective consciousness, and it sets the style for what's to come. Wow. I mean, this is extraordinary. The volume, the purity of it. Almost perfect cube. This is designed to overawe.
Almost 400 years after Inigo Jones, Amanda Levete is one of the leading British architects of her generation. Her innovative work can be seen around the world, from the Met Museum in Lisbon to the V&A in London.
Magnificent. Staircases have always captured our imagination. It's a moment for architects to choreograph movement. The illusion is that this stair is completely cantilevered from the wall. Charles I's master mason knew exactly how much stone he could take away in order to create this extraordinary interlocking, which means that the section can be even more slender. It almost looks structurally impossible. Even today, this stair feels modern. You feel uplifted, and there's nothing better than that.
It's based on Jones going to Italy in the 16 teens, being dazzled by what he sees, particularly in Venice, comes back really with this extraordinary toolkit.
But this European-style grandeur and Charles's Catholic wife herself are viewed with growing suspicion by hardline Protestants. The Puritans fear the rollback of the Reformation and yearn for a plainer, more austere culture.
And the Puritans hate art. They see an object which is being worshipped.
But Charles is spending lavishly on his collection of mainly European Catholic art.
Leonardo's, Raphael's, Titian's, Correggio's.
He believes artistic riches are expressions of his authority and his divine right to rule.
I mean, this staircase is architecture as the projection of power.
The manifestation of my power.
The Stuarts don't just buy into the European style, they import an artist who will redefine British art. Painting in England, with a level of skill no native artist can touch, Anthony van Dyck creates extraordinary portraits of the rich and famous.
Most people, who or anyone, were painted by Van Dyck. What is different about this picture is its scale and ambition.
This is an amazing picture because it's Van Dyck's biggest picture. It's absolutely huge, 3 by 5 meters.
It's a swagger portrait, and Van Dyck has a genius for getting away with it, I suppose.
Van Dyck trains under the great Flemish master Rubens. From his late teens, he runs a vast studio with scores of helpers. With an eye on further riches, he gets himself appointed court painter to Charles I in 1632.
Stuarts really go to town on bringing in great European contemporary artists. Anthony van Dyck, collected by Charles I and his court. He's very good at almost comical grandeur, but he is also a very, very intimate and down-to-earth, realistic painter.
Van Dyck provided something fresh and new, and it became the standard.
Is she happy? Is she looking forward to something? Is she not? Is he bored? Is he aspirational?
My novelty teas. Ooh.
Tai Shan Schierenberg is a British painter celebrated for his portraits. He sees Van Dyck as the great innovator.
I'm very bad at washing my brushes. I think a lot of artists don't like doing it. Van Dyck, you would have had some of the fresh apprentices doing the boring work, like cleaning your brushes. In Van Dyck's time, pigments would have been sold by travelling colour men, carmine, made from crushed beetle. When your copper goes off, you've got verdigris. Every black is made from charred bones. This comes all the way from Siena, Italy. A little bit of linseed oil. It's just the earth, isn't it? It's just wonderful. Made it rather runny, but I think Antonio would have liked it runny. Van Dyck would have been working on canvas, painted with a lead white. It is extremely toxic. But to make flesh tones with that is just beautiful. And that, I suspect, is what killed him in the end, at the age of 42. He would have done some drawings from initial sitting. The apprentice would have sketched it in for him. And Van Dyck would block in the painting in an hour and capture a likeness perfectly. It takes me weeks often. What the hell am I doing here? He just had a facility which was magical. Not only to create a believable head, but with emotional depth and with a sense not of the person looking like that, but also feeling like that. Oh my God. Magnificent and moving. I didn't think I would be moved. Man, can he paint?
The fourth Earl of Pembroke, Philip Herbert, is part of Charles I's intimate inner circle. This portrait shows the Earl surrounded by his family, celebrating the betrothal of 13-year-old Mary Villiers to 15-year-old Charles, the heir apparent.
Perfect composition. It's all triangles. You've got these boys, the triangle, these three. Oh, the triangle between Charles and Philip leading straight down to Mary Villiers. Rhythm through the painting is led by this dance of the hands. You can see why Van Dyck blew people's minds. There's a huge step up in technique. He captured how you felt. The Earl is showing off here. Van Dyck is showing off. So he's pushing Van Dyck as well. And Van Dyck's going, yeah, let's go for this. You know, as long as you're paying. Something's wrong. There's a real tension. I don't feel any warmth. We've got 10 people here. None of them are looking at each other. What has Van Dyck done here? It's painted in 1635. We're in a century of incredible upheaval. At the end of the century, we will have had 5 kings and a queen and regicide, and we've had a civil war.
The cleverness of Van Dyck is to capture a moment where you see all kinds of different tensions and problems that sit there right at the heart of the 1630s. And it's almost like a camera shutter snap. You've caught the moment.
The world that they represent, the silks and the fineries, will be brought down by the Puritan Commonwealth.
By the late 1630s, Charles I's reign is in crisis. He's tried to rule without Parliament, but is now forced to recall it to obtain money to put down unrest in Scotland. The standoff between king and Parliament fuels bitter divisions across generations, religion and class. The spectre of impending war is reflected in Van Dyck's work.
Many of the people in this painting will be dead. They'll take different sides in the Civil War.
It's a family portrait, but not about family in the sense that we understand it. It's talking about dynasties. Everybody in this is on the make or losing out. It's a very precarious world. The three angels, three boys who didn't survive their childhood. The second in line, he doesn't have a role. People dying before their time because of smallpox. The Earl of Carnarvon comes to a sticky end. In the Civil War, Philip Herbert beat somebody up in the House of Lords.
Lord Herbert himself had a grotesquely unhappy marriage. They weren't even living together when this painting was created.
None of these children are hers. She didn't want to be part of this circus.
On the one hand, very swanky Baroque portraiture, and on the other hand, that great old British thing, the soap opera.
This is a doomed world. It will all come crashing to an end very, very soon after this painting is painted. We talk about the English Civil War. It's not. It's the wars, plural, of the three kingdoms. It's about England, but it's about Scotland and Ireland.
There was war in Ireland from 1641 to 1653. It was immensely traumatic for Ireland, up to 25% of the population dying.
Violence will embroil all parts of the Isles, but nowhere more viciously than in Ireland, where the mass plantation of Protestants from England and Scotland in the early 1600s has caused hardship and resentment amongst Irish Catholics.
Large amounts of land were taken away from their Gaelic owners. The 1641 rebellion rose up to end anti-Catholic discrimination.
Rita Duffy is considered by many to be Northern Ireland's foremost living artist. Her figurative and often surreal work explores Ireland's troubled history and politics.
These are the woodcuts by Wenceslas Hollar, a depiction of an historical event from an English perspective. The wild Irish subjecting English settlers to all sorts of horrendous robbery and barbarism and torture. It's visuals for the English people to convince them in a very ferocious way what needs to happen in Ireland.
The Tears of Ireland are a set of 12 woodcut prints. They depict the 1641 rebellion, when native Catholics rose up against Protestant settlers, leaving between 4,000 and 12,000 dead. Distributed as pamphlets throughout England, the images are designed to stir up anti-Catholic feeling.
Priest blessing the troops, the rebels, promising that if they're killed, they'll go straight to heaven. The father is being hung, the children are being spit roasted. There's definitely sexual violence afoot. Her gown is lifted, her legs revealed. Men throwing an infant into a fire. It's beyond comprehension.
But these images are not quite what they seem.
Tears of Ireland is the original dodgy dossier.
It's propaganda at its worst, really.
The work insinuates connections between the Irish Catholic rebels and English royalists, stoking the growing crisis between king and parliament.
These are not wild Irishmen. These are King Charles's courtiers, English cavaliers, in their boots and their spurs and their sashes. The subliminal image is that guys dressed like that are bad. Could be doing this to your family tomorrow.
Wenceslas Hollar did a very good job of putting together a catalogue of propaganda. Being asked to do something like this, you're an artist, not a propagandist. Artists say no.
Hollar is one of the most accomplished graphic artists of the 17th century. He works prolifically for both sides during the Civil War.
I suspect he was trying to pay his bills as opposed to really engaging at any serious level of artistic practice.
Tears of Ireland takes a real-life set of tragedies and acts of violence, but repackages them in such a way as to drive up anti-Irish and anti-Catholic feeling for a London audience that is absolutely primed to receive that message.
And there's something very modern about this.
Fake news.
Printing has been very heavily controlled till now. All of a sudden, the brakes are off.
Fake news media.
The explosion of print in the 1630s, 500 to 600 books a year being published. In the 1640s, it's 4,000, it's pamphlets, sermons, ballads, confessional writings. Everybody can publish almost anything.
This isn't a complete fabrication. Like all the best propaganda, it's based on a germ of truth.
Brutality occurred on both sides, but to exaggerate them to that extent definitely fanned the flames.
Heightening that sense of difference and of hatred of the Catholic Irish in England.
I think there are probably elements of this that are real, unfortunately. We've seen it in wars time and time again. It is being very specifically geared towards instructing people how to feel. There's a freedom in art. There's no freedom in this. It's about you're with us or against us.
Rita's interrogation of the Tears of Ireland has inspired her to produce new work, exploring the impact of conflict on innocent victims.
The Taliban and their obsession with keeping women in burqas. The Congo, the bag over the head. It's history repeated over and over again. I've purposely made all the people naked because there's a vulnerability. There's no hierarchy. I'm prepared to kind of face into the pornography of those Tears of Ireland in the hope that somehow or other I can create something that is worthwhile, that has learning, that has nourishment. I hope that this will culminate in a major public installation. This was a starting point of the horrors of colonialism and warfare in general that we've been kind of struggling with these past centuries. And that's what propaganda does. It feeds into the worst parts of those kind of undiluted emotions that human beings have.
Civil war erupts across the Isles from 1642. Hundreds of thousands will die in England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland. What starts as a struggle for power, Crown against Parliament, is made more bloody as Puritan radicals seize their moment.
Proportionately, more British people died in the Civil War than in the First World War, and they died in British fields.
The royalists are defeated. The king is beheaded in 1649.
Once you behead the king, everything changes. The ancient regimes, the old ways of doing things are gone.
Oliver Cromwell harnesses fervent Puritan beliefs, rising to fill the power vacuum. Sweeping away courtly flamboyance, he will become Lord Protector of a newborn and short-lived republic. He chooses Hampton Court as his palace.
It's not a bad entrance to your weekend house, considering you're a man of the people.
Platon has photographed many of the world's most powerful people.
With Putin, I had 7 minutes. With Clinton, I had 8 minutes. With Hugo Chavez, I had 30 seconds. You learn to work really, really quickly. You know, this court really is about power, isn't it? It's a house of power. Photographing Oliver Cromwell, I would be a little intimidated. There's a system there to make you feel that you are less than the powerful person over there. And when I've been in the Kremlin or in the White House or 10 Downing Street, it does make you think, what would this person be like without this? What I do is strip them from this. There's no gimmicks, there's no tricks. It's just the person.
In the 17th century, exquisitely painted portrait miniatures are prized possessions of the rich and powerful. Just a few centimeters in diameter, these deeply intimate yet political objects are status symbols, sometimes gifted to diplomats and royalty. Like any great man, Cromwell once has said, he turns to Samuel Cooper to produce his likeness, but with a twist.
Cooper was possibly the first British artist who also had an international reputation.
Somebody who you went to if you wanted a very precise, very realistic portrait.
It is a picture of power. I'm not even sure whether he's smiling or angry. He's not really giving anything to you. A lot of powerful people, when you shake their hand, you know straight away from the grip of the hand and their eyes whether they are willing to interact with you. There's something strange about looking away. He's shutting us out a little bit. He's not really letting us in. And personally, I find that frustrating with this picture.
Cromwell is creating this kind of new Jerusalem in England, this Puritan vision.
Cromwell's regime is notionally based on the word of God. That's what he's used to mobilize these extreme forces. Cromwell has to ride this tiger of ISIS-like populism.
This is the experiment of the English Republic, a decade of Puritan austerity with music and theatre banned.
Cromwell said, "Don't flatter me. Paint me as I am." When I photographed Netanyahu, he whispered to me, "Platon, make me look good." This is the opposite, because Cromwell was against frivolity, against the idea of vanity, pomp and circumstance.
British art has always been very much about the real, down-to-earth sensibility. You could almost argue that Oliver Cromwell helped to invent a British art style, earthy realism.
I think Cromwell understands the need for a different visual representation. The Van Dyck tradition of all that colour,
fripperies and fineries,
and all that glamour,
lace collars and ruffs,
is absolutely not what he wants. You almost imagine Cromwell saying, "I'm going to turn up in an anorak."
Cromwell, perhaps he wants it documented in a way that sets the right tone of not being too self-obsessed. You could say that this picture is not particularly flattering. I don't look at it like that. I don't see the fact that he's balding as a bad thing. The wart. This is where the warts and all concept comes from. He would have had certainly the power to tell a portrait painter not to put the wart in. Some of my pictures have been referred to as warts and all pictures. I'm not trying to make anyone look bad or good. I'm trying really hard to make something authentic. Next to the wart is a hard shadow and a slight tensing of the brow. And that's the only bit in the picture for me that gives the game away. A side light creates harder lines in the muscles of your face. But I do get a sense that he's concentrating and he's determined. He wants his legacy documented, which is in itself an exercise in vanity. An uncomfortable idea for all political leaders. They know it's actually really important because it's how they will be remembered. I don't think he's like any of the American presidents I've worked with or any of the British prime ministers. I'd probably compare him more to Putin. I was informed the Kremlin thinks of portraiture as a side dish of vegetables to the meat. And I'm presuming that he thought of Cooper as a side dish of vegetables. That was the challenge for me, to get that eye contact, earn his trust, allow me to get a few inches away from his nose. I could feel his breath on my hand as I focused the lens. He's looking away. He's looking straight at us. But both of them are present, but they're not really playing. They're not really engaging. Cromwell consciously allowed his legacy to be shaped by this picture.
Cromwell's health fails in 1658, and with his demise, the English Republic crumbles. Charles I's exiled son, Charles II, is restored to the throne and brings with him a culture of excess. Ostentatious European high art is back in favour, but new and radical ideas have been unleashed by the war. One poet wrestles with the failure of the Republic. The result is an epic that transcends the century.
Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with the loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse.
Paradise Lost probably is the finest poem in the English language.
It sits at the heart of the entire radical dissenting tradition in English literature.
John Milton is a Puritan poet and civil servant who serves in Cromwell's Republic.
For Milton, free speech is an essential human right.
When Charles II is restored, Milton narrowly escapes execution for his support of the Republic. His books are condemned by royal proclamation.
If Milton's prose writing is anything to go by, he would have probably been happy to execute the king himself. But all he did was write.
Now blind, Milton dictates a vast, complex, paradoxical masterpiece. 7 years after Charles II is restored, Milton is back.
It is a deeply personal poem, very hard to pin down in terms of its meaning.
10,000 lines in length. It's set across the whole cosmos, the whole universe.
It starts with Satan and his fall from heaven. It's this great epic story about the fall of man.
Adam and Eve standing on the brink of freedom.
Committing the fatal first sin. It's about creation.
Free will.
Challenging authority.
Defeat.
Being punished with death and shame.
The possibility of redemption.
Love and hate and regret.
All of the things, of course, that actually make us human.
Milton asks for inspiration when he writes the poem. What in me is dark, illumine. What is
low, raise and support, that to the heights of this great argument I may assert the eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men.
He's writing with some greater purpose. He specifies it's to justify the ways of God to men, which is a massive task and claim. So Milton is a statesman who has opinions that go well beyond the literary realm.
The hero of Milton's epic is a daring creation, Satan as a sympathetic figure.
People want to say that somehow Milton is of the devil's party.
The devil is a deeply flawed character.
Charismatic, existential, angst-ridden.
Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwell. Hail horrors, hail infernal hell, and thou profoundest hell.
And he is a great orator, perhaps a populist even.
The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven.
He's the most active character, able to justify his opinions and ideas.
May my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
I do not want to bend my knee. A vision of freedom as a kind of allegory for the Civil War. Satan, the rebel, standing up against the absolute monarchy of God the King.
We as readers, be it in the 1670s or in the 21st century, do engage with him.
He's amazingly eloquent and seductive and powerful in his arguments. When he's persuading Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge.
He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes, that seem so clear yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods.
He lies, he deceives, he doesn't obey the absolutely rightful God.
Satan is, in many ways, the first existential being, the first to feel pain, the first to feel regret, and a tragic hero. Satan degrades over the course of the poem, and by the end, he loses out. But that's part of the complexity.
I think Satan is so compelling, so attractive a character, because he's so accessible. Stand at thy name, O Son. I tell thee that I hate thy beams. He's not yet the embodiment of evil. I bring to my remembrance from what state I fell, how glorious once, above thy sphere. But what we're seeing is a man, a human being like we are. He screwed up big time till pride, and worse, ambition, threw me down, warring in heaven against heaven's matchless king.
There are no real winners in Paradise Lost. There are no real losers either. Adam and Eve leave Eden hand in hand.
Immediately recognizable as ourselves. It's sad, it's lonely, but the world is their oyster.
And there's an element of hope. Art for Milton is not just about aestheticism. Art is about changing the world.
British culture is often said to be a literary culture. We didn't produce a Michelangelo, but we produced a Shakespeare. Perhaps that's because of Protestantism.
Cromwell's Puritan-led artistic austerity is gone. But the war has stimulated a more questioning culture too. A new drive to study physical phenomena like wounds in a closely observed, empirical way. The precursor to modern science is breaking cover.
The scientific revolution, for me, is where British art begins. The birth of Britain's artistic eye for nature and for the gritty truth, the microscopic truth.
Natural philosophers look for evidence of God not in the words of the Bible, but in nature.
Looking at the world closely is often associated with Robert Hooke. And what Hooke said is that you should draw with a sincere hand and a faithful eye. Just look at the world and translate it onto a piece of paper.
Hooke is a controversial figure, a largely self-taught polymath who comes from a lower social class than many of his peers. He's argumentative, famously difficult, and plagued by ill health.
The great rivalry of the age in science was between Hooke and Isaac Newton.
Hooke was a great pioneer, a very good mathematician and natural philosopher, but he also had this extraordinary mechanical skill, probably why Isaac Newton resented him so much.
Hooke's micrographia never ceases to amaze me. the first book which represents images taken under a microscope. Micrographia is like your ultimate science coffee table book, and it's a bestseller.
Extraordinary drawings.
Angela Palmer is an artist whose work uses scientific imaging and data to explore a world beyond our own vision.
See these images in nature. Just completely blown away by the beauty of these objects. Hooke studied them very closely under his microscope and drew them from life. He wanted them to look three-dimensional. This was a revolution. This was going to change people's perception of the natural world forever. Now this is his rock star, without a doubt. The flea. Hooke talked about its strength and its beauty. He described it with affection. Scourge in your household. And suddenly, people are able to see it, magnified. It caused a sensation at the time, and not surprisingly. The biter is like round-topped scissors with the same action. This was the invisible enemy that he made visible. The head of a fly. The two hemispheres in perfect symmetry. The eye looks like a lattice that's been drilled with a multitude of holes. The light of the sunshine, like we have right now, he said, like golden nails. Demonstration of Hooke's incredible facility as an artist. I don't think you would have seen shadows if he was thinking of it just purely as a scientific illustration. I think there is a beautiful artist's hand in this.
This empirical tradition, seeing is believing. You can see the world in a new way. This is a world which is changing in front of your eyes under the microscope.
It's a kind of visual drama, a visual theatre.
Natural philosophy was also part of getting closer to God, and you can't untangle natural philosophy and religious faith. Hooke draws objects from nature, and they're perfect because they've been made by God. Hooke would have denied that what he was creating was art, because art was artificial, art was artifice.
Crisp, sublime drawings, they have an emotional impact, not just an intellectual impact. They're not just information, okay?
The micrographia is a work of art. It's a work of science as well, and it's those two things coming together.
Hooke's conceptual breakthrough pioneers not just a new way of seeing the world, but a scientific culture that will become a key strength for the country.
This is the COVID-19 virus particle. 28 sheets of glass. It took me about 6 months to create this. So Robert Hooke used a light microscope. The coronavirus, it's 10,000 times smaller than Robert Hooke's flea. To get the atomic detail of that, scientists had to use X-ray crystallography. Hooke was using the very latest technology he could to produce work as true as possible to his subject. 350 years on, I don't make anything up. What you see is exactly as it is, engraving thousands and thousands and thousands of tiny dots onto sheets of glass. My work is a collaboration with scientists, and it could never be done without science. I think there is a parallel with Hooke's work in revealing the unseen to the world.
The famous modernist, minimalist saying, less is more. The Baroque believed that more is more. Gibbons brings that to wood carving.
This is about the redefinition of a discipline.
Grinling Gibbon's masterpiece at Petworth House brings together the exacting observation of the new sciences with the flourish of Stuart excess, the Baroque style. Gibbons is born in Rotterdam to English parents. John Evelyn, the diarist, discovers him working in poverty in Deptford, carving by candlelight, and is astonished by the ornate quality of his work. He brings him to the attention of Charles II.
And he's astute. He understands his talent, doing the right jobs for the right people. He becomes incredibly wealthy.
During the Restoration period, the aristocracy is spending big on art. And Gibbons will work for every monarch up to George I.
I've never been up the scaffold and looked at these carvings before, so I'm so excited. It's quite a moment, actually, to get up close and personal. Oh gosh, the tops of the heads are carved brilliantly. He's bothered to add the details of the hair quite far back in the composition. He's pulled these compositions together. It's not from one piece of wood. It's actually from multiple different sections and then all pinned or glued together. He's depicting real species here. That 17th century interest in the natural world. It feels very special to be up here, perhaps closest to that sense of Gibbon's own hand.
Gibbon's work is politically nuanced. By the mid-1680s, the Isles are fragmented, Crown and Parliament again divided. Charles II is succeeded by his Catholic brother, James. Tensions flare once more between Protestants and Catholics.
This is one of the most famous pieces of the carved room. Wonderful musical trophy, exhibiting that connection to the King and to the Queen.
In 1688, a Protestant Dutchman, William of Orange, sweeps aside James II in a bloodless coup. Protestant fears of a new Catholic dynasty subside.
And this actually shows a section of Purcell's Fairy Queen, which was composed to celebrate the anniversary of the marriage of William III and Queen Mary.
It's this idea of conceit and illusion which is always present in the second half of the 17th century.
Perhaps in a less Protestant culture, he might have done much more kind of serious sculpture.
He's writing wood carving into the history of art.
The restoration of the monarchy ushers in not just Baroque decoration, but Baroque living, a more showy, hedonistic age.
It's about freedom from moralizing puritanical constraints.
There is a torrent of literature, poetry, and plays.
Restoration drama is full of sex. It's all about the wrong people being in bed with each other. It's bawdy, salacious.
Theatre, banned under Cromwell, is back. Aphra Behn is acclaimed today for her coded satire about the place of women in the Restoration period.
Aphra Behn becomes the first paid or professional female playwright.
What Aphra Behn did was revolutionary.
She earned her money by her pen.
Behn is born in 1640 and grows up under the creative stifling of Cromwell's Puritan rule. She has an adventurous life, travelling to Antwerp to work as a spy for Charles II. Perhaps her best-known play is The Rover. It becomes a smash hit. The plot is based around a love triangle.
It follows two sisters as they attempt to engage in their own love interests during Carnival in Naples. Title character Wilmore, the rover,
is an awful man.
Got a rather roving eye, absolutely looking to get laid. The jolly that they're all on turns very dark very quickly, with enormous implications for women in general.
Aphra Behn's demonstrating the awful and brutal ways in which women are constrained.
'Tis true, I never was a lover yet. but I begin to have a pretty shrewd guess what 'tis to be so. Long and wish to see the man, and when I do, look pale and tremble, just as you did when our brother brought home that fine English colonel to see you. Fine. That blush betrays you. Now hang me if I don't love you for that dear disobedience.
There is an absolute double standard that operates in the 17th century in relation to male and female sexuality.
I love mischief, strangely, as most of our sex do, who are come to love nothing else.
A man can really do what he wants and get away with it. This is the thing that Aphra Behn returns to, that this is a wonderful dream, but it is a dream that structurally denied women.
Behn very rarely wrote a straight comedy. There are usually tragic undertones.
The giant stretches itself, yawns and sighs a belch or two, loud as a musket, throws himself into bed and expects you in his foul sheets. And this man you must kiss. Nay, you must kiss none but him too, and nuzzle through his beard to find his lips.
What it shows you is the darkness at the heart of a woman's role in Restoration comedy, which is that she can't be free.
While the paying public are drawn to the earthy satires of Restoration comedy, a great project with heavenly aspirations slowly creeps towards completion. The rebuilding of St. Paul's embodies the religious, political, and artistic tensions of the century. A fusion of science and the Baroque, overseen by astronomer and architect Christopher Wren.
It's hard to think about London without thinking about St. Paul's, symbolising the rising back after the Great Fire of London. It survived World War II. There were royal weddings that have happened there, and the Occupy movement. The building that defined London's skyline. I mean, if you imagine trying to make that, how do you begin? How do we coordinate our efforts? How do we find the materials? How do you then make that last 400 years? It must have a dome, because the dome was the truly civilized, rational thing.
This dome is about recentering the world in London.
What's the biggest vanity project London's ever done? It feels like it's been ripped out of Rome and dropped into a scorched city where 3/4 of the population were homeless. This was just ludicrously big. An astronomer, a natural philosopher, Christopher Wren was asked to do this. So was it his vanity, or was it society's? All around here in the studio are things that give you ideas.
Thomas Heatherwick is one of the leading designers of his generation.
The Shanghai World Expo building that would move in the wind. This is the model of the Olympic cauldron. We made a full-size top floor to test when you sat down and the roof curved round you, would you bash your head on it? I'm standing here wondering, what is our thing about looking up? If there wasn't daylight round there, you wouldn't look up. The dome of St. Paul's, it's actually a symbol of the new science and of the Newtonian cosmos. All these different symmetries that have been set up here, the tools of architecture that are there to invoke emotion in you. Gravity-defying, to have something that doesn't fall on you, that creates space like this. Borrowing so heavily from continental European Catholic architecture. Fresco, tick. Pediments, tick. Cornicing, tick. It wasn't actually original, but it was being delivered at scale.
It's an illusion that these columns are carrying on up. Is it the most beautiful space you've ever been in? No. In architecture and design, a lot of time is spent thinking about whether something is honest and true to materials. And we experience, when we're inside, this bit, and when we're outside, we experience that bit. But actually, they are vastly different. They're not even at the same height. They're 6 stories different. In order to hold up the stone tower with the cross at the very, very top, there is a cone, like a traffic cone, that is standing on these walls. Behind me is a brick cone. So structure and visual reality are 2 different things.
A mathematical circumscribing of our belief.
It is a great, big, fantastic fake.
He's fooling you. When you expose the trickery, does it ruin the delight? And I think if that's what it took to give the human experience, I think that's fine. How do we weigh up all the money and craftsmanship and time and materials that went into this? Do we think it should have done something else instead? Or do we think that was worth it? London has done its best to preserve this as a symbol for a city. Its design is utterly derivative, but that doesn't stop it having immense power as an object, as an artifact, possibly the most important British building. Is it the most creative thing that's ever happened in Britain? Not at all. But it happened.
Emerging out of the conflicted culture created by the Civil War, St. Paul's is finally completed in 1710, at the dawn of a new era.
Britain is starting to emerge as an original contributor.
Radical ideas about freedom, although they didn't take flight in England, they were immensely important in the American Revolution and as well of the French Revolution.
The arts changing its ambition away from being purely aesthetic, driving the political agenda.
That's what great art always does. It transcends society. It leads you with a notion of a political place called Great Britain as fractured and as difficult as it still is today.
Next time, an explosion of creativity is driven by Britain's new religion, money. But radical voices emerge attacking hypocrisy and exposing the barbarity of the slave trade. When did you last subvert the status quo? Be inspired by some of the incredible but overlooked individuals who disrupted history with their creativity. Go to bbc.co.uk/art that made us and follow the links to the Open University.